All right, folks, we are getting started just in a moment here. We're going to let people come into the webinar and we'll probably give it just about 60 or 90 seconds. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We're just here for about 60 minutes today. So we're just going to let the Zoom webinar populate and then we will get going. One thing that would be awesome is if you can you just put in the chat if you can see and hear me? Just want to make sure everyone can hear me. Can you put in the chat? Okay, awesome, great, excellent, excellent, great, great, great. And then also, can you put in the chat where you're calling in from? Are you calling in from California? Are you calling in from another state? If so, where in California? What's your city and state? Awesome, we got some California folks, Canada, Oakland, California, Santa Cruz, Chicago, Texas. Excellent, excellent, great folks, great. Really glad that you're all here today. Last thing I'm going to do just as a test while we're waiting for folks to come in is I am going to share my screen and get our slides going. So now you should be able to see my slides. It says mindfulness for stress, anxiety, and depression. If you can see that, can you just click yes? That would be super helpful. Awesome. Great. Glad you are all here. Okay, I'm just going to take a sip of water and then we are going to get going in just a moment here. All right, folks, welcome, welcome. Got a lot of folks from San Jose to Livermore to Texas. Awesome. All right. We're 2 minutes off the hour, so I want to respect everyone's time and get started here. First thing is first, I need to just read a brief disclaimer because this is a webinar that is being put on by our clinic, which is called Family Spring and Family Spring Psychology. We just want to make sure everyone knows this, and you clicked on this when you registered for the webinar. But I'm just going to read it just because I was told that it's probably a good idea to do this. So I'm going to read it word for word. The tips offered in this webinar by Family Spring and Family Spring Psychology are offered as a free public service to the community and does not create any client or professional relationship or obligation between you as a participant in Family Spring or Family Spring Psychology, its officers, agents, and or employees. The purpose of this webinar is to offer practice tips. It is not psychotherapy in any form or manner. The reason we wanted to do that is to review that is just because some of you probably may even be therapists yourself. Some of you may be providers yourself. Some of you may have came across this webinar because you're struggling with stress or anxiety or depression. And we as a clinic, as a company, we want to be able to offer free tips and resources like this, and we will be doing a lot of other webinars in the future as well. But we also just want to clarify and let everybody know from the outset that this isn't a therapy relationship. If that's something you're interested in, you can get in touch with us, and we can let you know how to engage in that. Other thing I want to say too briefly is for those of you who signed up for last week's webinar with Surbi Mehta on yoga techniques for depression and anxiety, we deeply, deeply apologize that we had to postpone that. Life happens to therapists as well. And she had something come up that she couldn't get out of. She felt terrible, but she's really excited. We are going to be rescheduling that for the end of July, a little over a month from now. Tuesday the 27th, I believe, of July, and you will get updated that if you stay on the email list. So I just wanted to let you know that as well. A couple of other quick housekeeping things. I want to give a shout out to our social media links because we post a lot of content there, or we will be posting a lot of content there. And that's one place you'll be able to hear about our upcoming webinars, other free tips and things like that. And I really, really want to highlight the YouTube channel. We just started a YouTube channel and you'll see there when I drop the link in a second that There's a bunch of videos up there by my co-founder, Dr. Mika Gonzalez. We are going to be putting this webinar on the YouTube channel, all upcoming webinars. We're going to be putting a bunch of free content up there. So everything from how to, work with your kids and instill discipline in them, to here's a few meditations that can help with anxiety, depression, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just going to drop those links in the chat very quickly before we move on, just so you can have them. And like I said, there will be many other things that come in those, what's it called, in the um, through that social media in the future. So this is our LinkedIn. We just started that page. That's why there's only a few followers there. Family Spring on Facebook has been around a little bit longer. So go ahead and check that out and follow if you wouldn't mind. And finally, our YouTube channel. I'm just going to put this up here real quick. Again, this is the big one. If you can subscribe to the YouTube channel, or go check it out. You'll see a bunch of videos already there. We just started this like within the last week or two. That's why it's kind of brand new. My partner, like I said, has a 1 Minute Monday series where we offer a quick tip on Mondays. I highly recommend it. So anyways, let's get on with the show. And I want to tell you a little bit about myself, because I think it's important as part of my pedagogy for you to know who the presenter is. And then we will blast off into the content. So who am I? I'm a licensed psychologist here in Oakland, California. I mostly specialize in working with youth and young adult populations. I'm most known for working with marginalized youth, incarcerated youth, teaching mindfulness to traumatized youth. But throughout my whole career, I've been licensed since about 2012, so almost coming up on 10 years here. And I've been doing the work for about 15 years. Throughout my whole career, I've had a private practice on the side of my other professional work, where I've worked with people who have dealt with trauma, with excessive stress, with anxiety disorders, depressive disorders. And over the years, it became clear that in order for me to do this work with integrity, I had to really gain expertise in all of these issues and come up with modalities and learn how to help folks who are struggling with those issues develop resilience, develop regulation skills. That's where I really became passionate about mindfulness over the years. I've written 3 books. My first book, they're all about mindfulness, and they are all about working with youth, but a lot of these principles and practices really apply to working with young adults and older adults as well. And so when I'm working with one of my private practice, mid-30s patient who's an engineer or something like that, it's actually not too different from how I work with, one of my incarcerated youth clients. It's all about the relationship. It's about evidence-based principles and practices. It's about helping our clients meet the goals that they want to meet. And that's what all of our clinicians at Family Spring do as well, including Serby, who was going to be on our webinar last week, and who will do that postponed webinar at the end of July. So my first book was really about, kind of an ode to doing therapy with incarcerated youth. My second book is a curriculum for mindfulness-based substance abuse treatment, and that came out in 2015. And then my most recent book is about the interface between mindfulness, trauma, anxiety, stress, building relationships, so on and so forth. And the real reason I'm here, like my core why, is I got in a lot of trouble as a kid. I struggled with mental health issues. I struggled with anxiety, anger, trauma. I was in and out of juvenile hall. And very long story short, I was lucky enough to be able to change my life around because I got in trouble so young to, get it together by high school, go to college, get a PhD in clinical psychology, and kind of the rest is history. That's why I became a psychologist, and why I run a company that helps people who are struggling. So that's why I'm here, and I'm just really excited and thankful and honored to be here for this short hour with you. So here's what we're going to do today. We are going to talk about what mindfulness is. We're going to talk about how it can help with anxiety, with stress, with depressive symptoms. We're going to go over a few mindfulness meditations, at least one, maybe two if we have time. And I'm also going to teach you how to practice mindfulness without meditating, without closing your eyes, without even saying the word meditation, because sometimes the informal mindfulness is really, really important. I'm going to start off with a kind of a self-care paradigm that I think is really important to just contextualize where the practice of mindfulness could be helpful. And then we'll cap it off with some open Q&A. If you have any questions, what I really want to suggest is don't put the questions in the chat. I'm actually not going to be looking at the chat, because when I present, if I look at the chat, I'll just kind of get off track. Put your questions in the Q&A. So if you have questions about mindfulness, about anything that you're dealing with right now and how mindfulness might be able to help, or if questions come up throughout the presentation, go ahead and put that in the Q&A. And we'll take about the last 10 minutes or so, maybe a little bit less depending on time, to answer some of those live questions. Last logistics, and then we'll kind of hop in, is sometimes I tend to move a little fast. I've been presenting for a long time now. And if I move fast, I apologize in advance. I ask for your forgiveness in advance. Just know that means I'm passionate about what I'm talking about, and I will try and keep an awareness to slow down at times, but also know this is being recorded. After today, we're going to upload it to our YouTube channel, and we will send you a link before the end of the day so you can check out the recording as well. If you're here live with us, if you need to, go back and review a concept or a practice or something like that, or if you weren't here live with us and you're waiting for the replay link. So without further ado, let's hop in. So this is very important. This is what I like to call the 4 pillars of intra-optimal well-being. Intra-optimal, intra meaning like inside of ourselves, right? This is kind of a self-care paradigm where if we practice these 4 things, we're going to at least be pointed in the right direction to be able to practice good self-care. And good self-care basically means the things, the practices that we do consistently so that we can develop resilience over time. And what are we resilient to? We learn to be resilient to our anxiety, to our stress, to depressive symptoms, if that's what's arising for you. And so these bottom 3 right here are all physical. They're physical self-care practices for our body, but they have extreme, very positive impacts on our mental health. The top, MT, that actually stands for mental training. So that's something we would do with our minds. But in this case today, we're talking about mindfulness. So we can call that mindfulness training. Now, I want to just say really quickly, because I had meant to be really brief on this. There's a lot of research, for example, that shows that sleep, exercise, and nutrition have profound positive impacts on our body. If you can, start to regulate and mitigate those aspects of your life, you might start to see a bunch of positive mental health impacts, a bunch of well-being impacts that will help you more than you thought. For example, if you thought you needed therapy, sometimes we need therapy, right? I'm a therapist. Sometimes professional support is really important. I'll talk about how to do that a little bit later in the presentation. But one of the real truest jobs of every therapist job, this is how we are at Family Spring, this is how I am, Serbi, my partner Mika, this is how all of us are. We try to work ourselves out of a job. We try to help you build capacity so you don't have to be in therapy for the rest of your lives, right? If you can practice good nutrition, which means different things for different people, of course, right? A good exercise routine, which also means different things for different bodies, different people, and good sleep, you might think you need therapy, but after implementing those for a few weeks, you might start to feel better and things might start to fall in place in your life. And of course, you add something like mindfulness training or other good mental training habits, you really might be on your way. And I just want to give a quick nod to the bottom of the pyramid, sleep. This is at the bottom because there is an extensive amount of research that shows positive physical, mental, emotional, so many different impacts on sleeping well. Now, for those of you who signed up for this webinar who have struggled with depressive symptoms, that may be a little bit of a pain point, right? Because one of the diagnostic criteria of depression, at least as a psychologist, when I see it in my practice, is there's something off about sleep. You may be sleeping too much, you may be sleeping too little. So, what I mean by a solid sleep routine is doing what's right for you. When you can do that, when you practice all these three on the bottom of the pyramid, and add something like mindfulness, what is what we're going to talk about today, you really can point yourself in the direction of really good self-care, and you will be on your way to developing resilience. So again, one thing that I should mention as well is if you're interested in these slides, we will send these in the email with the YouTube link as well. Just a quick nod to if any of you are struggling with anxiety, stress, depression, or if you know anybody who's doing it, I'm not going to go too deep into the conceptuals of like what are the diagnostic criteria and things like that, because this is really geared towards the public, and we want to focus on pragmatic, concrete tips that you could take away. But I just wanted to kind of give a quick nod to what some of you or people may be experiencing, right? Like over this last year, a little bit longer than a year, with the pandemic, with COVID, it is not uncommon or abnormal to feel stress, to feel anxiety, to worry about the future, to feel a little hopeless, or to feel a little depressed about everything that was going on. I mean, that's tough, right? On top of that, we all have our own lives, right? We have issues with our jobs, it's issues with our colleagues when they come up, conflict in our peer circles, conflict at home, whatever it is, we all are dealing with life, right? And when things get too overwhelming that they start to kind of stick to us, like it's one thing to be, have a stressful day at work. It's another thing to um, be so stressed out that over time you just can't shake the stress. When we're too stressed out, when our system is too stressed out, when we have really when we go through dangerous or really threatening experiences, whether could be something violent, or whether it could be something of dealing with the extreme unpredictability of the unknown of COVID, for example. If maybe some of us were feeling that 6 months ago, not knowing what was going to happen, that can lead to trauma. Just like it's normal sometimes to worry, right? It's normal sometimes to have the experience of anxiety. But what's abnormal is if that anxiety gets to the point where it becomes an anxiety disorder, or the depression. Sometimes it's okay to feel a little down. If it becomes habitual and it happens over and over and over again, that's when we get into the realm of a depressive disorder. As a psychologist who works with folks struggling from this, um, one of the main criteria is, is it getting in the way of life? It's one thing if you're a little stressed out or feeling anxious, but you can function, you can go to school, you can go to work, it's not getting in the way of your interpersonal relationships. It's another thing, and it starts to get into that realm of, is this a problem? Is this an issue that we need to work out? If it's getting in the way of interpersonal relationships, if it's getting in the way of work or school or whatever your profession is, right? And so that's, some of you may be here because of that and you want to learn. Others of you may have been through a process like this or know people who are going through something like this. And what we're going to talk about today is really, how do we start the regulation process? How do we start to bring some predictability in our lives through these self-care practices, particularly mindfulness today, so that we can gain some of the benefits, so that we can take control of our lives. Just really quickly here, I'm looking at the time and I really want to get into the mindfulness piece, but one last kind of conceptual map. This wonderful picture here, by the way, that I found online, I couldn't find the source of it, but this yellow nerve that you see coming down from the inner ear going all the way into the gut, that's the vagus nerve. And I'll just keep it brief here and say that has a lot to do with regulating our autonomic nervous system. So there's the central nervous system, there's the peripheral nervous system. One of the divisions of the peripheral nervous system is the autonomic nervous system, the ANS. I like to call it the automatic nervous system, meaning it governs things that you don't have to think about. And the vagus nerve is really important because it governs our parasympathetic nervous system, which is our relaxation response, and our sympathetic nervous system, which is our stress response, right? And in extreme forms with trauma, that's what governs our fight, flight, freeze, feign death. And I just want to say real quick, I just wanted to mention this real quick to say that when we're feeling anxious or even depressed, oftentimes there's some correlate with the vagus nerve. And the good news is there is a way to regulate this. This is what I do professionally. I help people regulate their internal nervous system, which has an impact on their overall body, which has an impact on their emotion and their cognition as well. And today we're going to be talking about how to do that with mindfulness. But first, let's define what mindfulness is. I like to define mindfulness with a metaphor called the lion mind versus dog mind metaphor. When I used to work at a nonprofit called the MBA Project, we would teach meditation to incarcerated youth, and we would use this metaphor. I've probably used it about 1,000 times. So when I first set up a group or do a one-on-one with the youth, I would use this metaphor to define mindfulness because it's so important to define what mindfulness is and what mindfulness isn't before we move on with the practices. So this is the metaphor. Let's say this is my meditation bell right here. If you could see me on the side, let's say that this was a bone and I was standing in front of this dog and I waved the bone in the dog's face and then I threw the bone 10 yards to the right. What do you think the dog would do in that moment? If you feel like engaging, you can put that in the chat. What do you think the dog would do? If you're anything like the incarcerated youth that I usually teach this to, you might say something like, the dog would go get the bone. And you're probably right. Most of the time, the dog is going to go get the bone, right? Now let's say, and I don't know why I would ever be in this situation, but now let's say I'm standing in front of this majestic looking lion and I wave the bone in the lion's face and I throw the bone 10 yards to the right. What do you think the lion would do in that situation? If you feel like engaging, you could put your answer in the chat. Um, if you're anything like the youth I worked with or work with, you might say something like, he's going to eat you or the lion's going to get you. And I always respond to that with, the lion could get me, the lion might get me, but there's a fundamental difference between the mind of the lion and the mind of the dog. What are the eyes of the dog doing when I'm waving the bone in the dog's face? Most likely the dog is going to be clocked right on the bone. So if I wave the bone over here, the dog's eyes go over here. If I throw the bone over there, or if I throw the bone over there, the dog goes and gets the bone. The dog is experiencing tunnel vision. The dog only sees the bone, at least for those few moments, right? So if the dog only sees the bone, if I control the bone, I control the dog's reality, at least for those few moments. What about the eyes of the lion? What are the eyes of the lion doing when I'm waving the bone in the lion's face? Well, I've actually never been in that situation before, thank God. But this is a metaphor. So to go along with the metaphor, when I'm waving the bone in the lion's face, the eyes of the lion are looking through the bone. They're clocked right on me. Can the lion see the bone? Yes, the lion can see the bone, but the lion also can see a larger reality. The lion sees that there's a human being standing right there, connected to an arm, connected to the bone, right? And what does that do? The larger reality awards the lion more autonomy. So less tunnel vision like the puppy or the dog. When I throw the bone over there, the lion has options. The lion says, maybe I'll go get the bone, or maybe I'll come after you because you have more bones in your body than you threw over there, right? The lion has options. That's what mindfulness is. It's about being present and understanding that you can create space around these experiences of anxiety, of depression, of thoughts, of feelings, so that you actually can have options of how you respond. You may not have a choice of whether the symptom of anxiety comes up or a worrying thought comes up or a stressful experience comes up. We might not have a choice in that, but we do have choice in how we respond to it. So to take the metaphor one step further, imagine the bone, something like a strong emotion or experience. It could be anxiety if you're struggling with anxiety, or depression if you're struggling with depression, or even anger, right? If the bone of anger arises in your awareness, And if I, for example, react with the puppy mind or the dog mind, I do whatever it is I do when I get angry. My fists clench, my heart pounds, I yell, I curse, I fight. When anxiety arises, if I'm reacting with the puppy mind, I do whatever it is I do when I'm anxious, right? But it's different with the lion mind. If anxiety or depression or anger arises inside of me and I experience it or approach it with the lion mind, it's different. I might have the thought, I'm anxious right now, or I'm feeling a thought of, or I'm noticing a thought of hopelessness right now, or I'm angry right now. Even just that thought, that's called a metacognition. It's a thought about what your experience is. Even just that thought is different from the dog or the puppy mind. And it puts a little bit of distance between you and the experience of the depression, or you and the experience of stress, right? And that's what mindfulness is about creating that space between you and that experience so that we can learn to disidentify from it. Not detached. We're not trying to not feel it, right? But just disidentify in the sense that you are not your anxiety. You are not the worrisome thought that comes up. You are not the anger or the stress or the depression that you experience. It's just an experience that comes up inside of you. That's what disidentification means. It's learning to know that you're more than that, that you can create space around that, that the totality of your identity is not your anxiety or depression or stress or anger, right? That's the power of what mindfulness is. It helps us to be present with an attitude of non-reactivity. Another way to say that is equanimity, right? And so that's what mindfulness is. That's what the lion mind is. And this is how I tend to teach mindfulness when I'm working with my clients. And most of the people here at Family Spring do that as well. Just to really kind of integrate it in a little bit more. Um, One thing we didn't say, for example, we just said mindfulness is the lion mind. Mindfulness is being present to whatever it is. It doesn't matter that we may not be able to control the bones of anxiety or depression or anger or whatever they are when they come up, right? So we're present to whatever is in our experience with an attitude of equanimity, meaning non-reactivity or non-judgment, right? What we did not say is, I need to be calm right now. Calm is striving for a different type of experience. And if you can learn to calm yourself down, that's great. That's a wonderful practice. But sometimes you may be so anxious that the thoughts just don't stop. And no matter how hard you try this breathing technique or that breathing technique, it doesn't calm down. So mindfulness is there to learn to be present to what is. Because when you approach what is with an attitude of equanimity, of balance, of non-reactivity, the irony is that you'll notice that it comes and goes a little bit more. And that's how you start to create space and get past the depression or anxiety. So the myth is that when we're practicing mindfulness, we have this image of the person closing their eyes, holding their hands in a certain way, and meditating and like being really calm and serene. But that's not the case at all, as some of us may find out when we practice this strategy in just a couple of minutes. Or it may be, I need to have my thought, like no thinking, serenity, just blank slate, right? And that's not the case. Sometimes when you meditate or practice mindfulness or are just aware of what's going on, you're going to notice a lot of thoughts. Sometimes it's less active, sometimes it's more active. And then finally, one of the other most common myths that I encounter as a professional is people think that meditation is the only way to practice mindfulness. So meditation, we'll try it in a few moments for those of you who are willing and able. Meditation is the formal training of how we practice mindfulness. We do something very specific with our mind. But that's not the only way to practice mindfulness, because you can be practicing the lion mind. You can be practicing mindfulness, again, which is non-reactive present moment awareness. You can do that right now as you're listening to this webinar. You can do it when you're talking with a friend, when your supervisor who is frustrating you is talking to you at work, when you're talking to a colleague, when you're talking to a client, whatever it is, right? You don't need to sit down and do something specific with your mind to actually bear the fruit or experience the fruit of what mindfulness is. What mindfulness is, it's so much more than meditation. Albeit meditation is very powerful, right? So there are two different ways to practice. We can practice formally through mindfulness meditation, and we can practice informally, just trying to bring our awareness to this present moment as much as possible in our daily lives. So we'll talk about both of those. I want to first give us the experience of mindful breathing, which is one of the most, I would say, most common ways to start with mindfulness meditation. And what I really want to do is contextualize it by telling you what we're about to do. And then you can make the choice with us here live if you'd like to actually do it with us. And we'll just do it for a few minutes, and then we'll do it, process a little bit. And then we'll go into another strategy. But this is a really good way to start your mindfulness practice. So, what are the 3 steps for mindful breathing? First, we want to set an intention. Again, remember, the intention is not to have no thoughts, it's not to be calm. Some of you may experience being calm and having no thoughts when we do this, and that's totally okay. That's what we would call kind of a fruit along the path, but it's not the end goal. It's not the destination. The end goal is to learn how to be equanimous, is to learn that non-reactivity and to be present and not judging, right? Because ultimately what we do, like for example, what my colleague Serbi, who hopefully y'all will come to her webinar next month at the end of July, what she does when she's working with clients is she helps them become aware of the anxiety, learn not to judge all of these little symptoms or different types of symptoms that come together and paint the experience of anxiety. And by doing that, she helps her clients manage the anxiety first better and take more control over their lives, right? So it starts with equanimity, because again, remember, sometimes we can get so active and overwhelmed in our minds that we try to calm down and we can't, right? So step 1 is equanimity. That's the intention. Step 2, choose your anchor. The anchor is where you'll be aware of your breathing, like where physically, right? So I want to just invite you to do something with me real quick. If you can, just sit up somewhat straight and take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. Just do it with me right now. And just notice where it was easiest to sense your breathing. Maybe it was easiest to sense your breathing in your belly, and you feel like the inflation and deflation of the belly. Maybe it was your chest, feeling your chest rise and fall. Maybe it was your nostrils, feeling the actual touch of the breath and touch of the air as you breathe in and breathe out. That's your anchor. It anchors you to your body, which is always living in the now. It's always in this present moment. So the anchor is really important, because we need to have an anchor to anchor ourselves in the present moment. Because what we're doing when we're starting mindfulness meditation and mindful breathing in particular is that we're learning to sustain our awareness into the present moment, so that when all of these different bones of thoughts, of images, of narratives, of physical sensations, even emotions sometimes, when those come up, we learn to watch them, we learn to observe them with an attitude of equanimity, of non-reactivity, right? And the anchor is also really important because it ties into our very basic instruction for mindful breathing, which is we're going to become aware of our breath, and we're going to become aware of our breath through our anchor. So through our nostrils or our belly or chest or ribs or wherever it's easiest to sense our breathing. And then inevitably our mind is going to wander. You're going to take 2 breaths, 3 breaths, 5 breaths, and then your mind will be off into imagination land, thinking about lunch, thinking about dinner, thinking about that email you want to respond to, thinking about frustrating things, pleasant things, neutral things, right? All of that comes up when you're meditating, and it's very normal. Remember, step 1 is equanimity. So when that happens, there's no need to get frustrated or think you're doing anything wrong, right? You'll hear me say this in the meditation itself. And that's the basic instruction. Awareness of breathing through our anchor. The mind will wander at some point. When we notice the mind wandering, we bring it back to our anchor, non-judgmentally, non-critically. Awareness of breath, mind wanders away, bring awareness back to breath, non-judgmentally. That's what the practice is. So if you're willing and able, let's try some. We've been looking at the menu long enough. Let's experience the food. So what I want to invite you to do, if you're comfortable, and we'll just do this for about three minutes or so, not too long, but long enough to get a little bit of an experience with it. 4 minutes. If you're able to do this, that would be great. If not, remember this is being recorded. If you have kids running around in the background or whatever you're doing, that's totally okay. But if you're willing and able, I want to invite you to sit in a comfortable position. It's good to have your feet flat on the floor and your back somewhat straight. That'll actually help with your respiration, with your breathing, but it's not mandatory. Do whatever feels comfortable. And then I also want to invite you to close your eyes. Oftentimes we close our eyes to just not get distracted by the world around us. But if you do not feel comfortable closing your eyes, it is absolutely okay to keep your eyes open. If you do keep your eyes open, I just suggest that you have kind of a soft gaze around you, like your peripheral. You're not looking at anything in particular. And when you hear the sound of the bell, just start by bringing your awareness to your breathing, wherever you can sense it easiest, that anchor, and then wait for further instructions. Breathing in and breathing out. Just reminding ourselves as we get started that our intention is equanimity. Our intention is to foster present moment, non-reactive awareness. And we'll do that in this exercise by paying attention to our breath, noticing where it's easiest to sense our breath, the belly, the chest, the nostrils, and letting our awareness rest right there. Breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in, aware that you're breathing in. Breathing out, aware that you're breathing out. You might notice after a few breaths in and a few breaths out that the mind wanders away. You start to think about things other than the breath. Thoughts arise, images, narratives. Whenever the mind wanders, there's no need to think you're doing anything wrong. No need to be critical. It is the practice of equanimity to just take note. The mind has wandered, and gently bring our awareness back to our anchor point, wherever it's easiest to sense our breath. Breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. Right now, the mind may be calm and serene, or it may be active or overwhelmed with thinking, or anything in between. Remember, the goal is not to be calm, although if you have that experience, that's okay. The goal is simply to use the breath to bring our awareness to the body, to bring our awareness to the here and now, over and over again. Breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. In a few moments, I'll ring the bell. And when I do, I just want to invite you to listen to the sound of the bell until you can't hear it any longer, or until it's no longer there. And then when you feel comfortable, if your eyes were closed, you can slowly open them, expanding your awareness outside of the formal exercise. All right, folks, thanks for doing that. If you need to stretch a little bit, if you need to adjust, if you need to sip some coffee, tea, or water, now would be a good time to do that. And I would love if you were able to participate. Could you just put in the chat, what was that like for you? Was it easy? Was it difficult? Was it calming? Were you overwhelmed with thinking the whole way through? Go ahead and just put that in the chat for a moment if you can, while I take a sip of water here. I always love that part of the presentation because I get to kind of tap into myself as well and just be present for those moments. Even though I'm teaching the mindfulness exercise, it's still helpful for me. Yeah, this is really great. A lot of people saying they're feeling calm. Some people saying couldn't stop my mind from thinking. Awareness of thoughts, very relaxed. All very normal stuff. All very normal stuff. Anybody who says it made you sleepy, a couple of those came through. That's also very normal as well. This is why sleep is so important. Remember, I was saying at the beginning about sleep. If you decide to start meditating after this and you notice yourself getting very sleepy, that just might be an indicator that, hey, let me assess, my sleep schedule. Let me assess what my relationship to sleep is, right? This is great feedback, folks. I'm loving all of this. Awareness of breathing with a few distractions. Mind was wandering with ideas. Sometimes it was a challenge to come back without judgment to the breath. But yes, that's the key. That's the practice, right? It's sometimes when the mind wanders, uh, there's a silver lining in it, because if you are to stay concentrated on your breath all the way through, which some people can do, the silver lining that they're not getting is the ability to practice non-judgment. Because it'd be so easy when we're practicing meditation, mindful breathing, to, for example, say, oh, my mind is just all over the place. I'm terrible at meditation. I can't do this, right? Those are both judgments. Those are both layers of reactivity, right? But when we train ourselves to say, the mind has wandered, that's okay. I'm going to bring it back to the breath now. When we do that with non judgment over and over, like if you have a really active mind, over and over and over again, we're training ourselves to be non reactive, to be non judgmental. We're training ourselves to be equanimous. And that's really what the practice is about. We just did about 3 or 4 minutes. And the practice, and you'll hear me saying a little bit right before we end, you'll hear me say, like, it's good to start slow, like start with little, like little time frames. Don't start with like 30 minutes, start with like 2 minutes, for example. But just know that the practice is designed to be a little bit longer. If you do that for 3 minutes and you feel calm, for example, think about what it would be like to do it for like 15, 20, 25 minutes, right? Our experience is going to be much more up and down because that's what life is like. We'll be calm for a little bit. We'll have no thoughts for a little bit. We'll just be present with the breath. Thoughts will be overactive at times. Our knee will hurt at times. We'll feel pain in our back, right? Our experience will go up and down. All of that experiencing is what we're training ourselves to be first present to. That's why we're bringing our awareness to the breath in the present moment. And then second, to learn to be non-reactive, to learn to be equanimous. That's what the goal is. Because if we can do that, and yes, it takes time, it takes training, right? If we can do that, we can learn to be equanimous towards the things that are really difficult to not be reactive to, the worrisome thoughts, the physiological correlates of anxiety, the hopelessness that's associated sometimes with depression, the overall physical vibrations that can be associated with stress. right? When we can learn to do that over time, we can condition ourselves. That's what helps us create space around the anxiety. That's what actually gets us first on the path to regulation and learning to manage ourselves, and ultimately on the path to healing. That's what we do, for example, in our sessions over time, over the relationship with a lot of our clients. So that was an example of mindful breathing meditation, which is a form of mindfulness meditation. But we don't always have time to meditate. And like I said, uh, there are other opportunities to practice as well. And I want to teach you one very simple, very brief technique that can help start to facilitate the meditate, or excuse me, start to facilitate the mindfulness process without even ever have to doing anything formal. So no, closing your eyes or sitting up in a particular way and just following the breath. These are just short snippets of awareness that we can do anytime, even when we're in conversation with somebody, that can help us start to manage our experience by way of being present and non reactive. So, this is a cognitive acronym called TAP. And the idea is, it's a lot of the teens that I work with, a lot of the young adults that I work with, they like to colloquially say, like when they see me, if I'm going into the juvenile hall or if I'm working in a school or something like that, even sometimes in my private practice, they like to say, hey, Sam, let's tap in, like let's check in, right? So the idea is, remember the cognitive acronym TAP as a way to tap in with yourself, be able to be present in the moment, and bear some of the fruits of mindfulness without having to take even a few more minutes to practice a form of meditation, right? And so TAP stands for take a breath, which we start off, you know, you can learn to anchor yourself in the moment without taking a breath, because you can do that through the body. But taking a breath is just a good formal way to start. So we would breathe in, breathe out. That brings us into the present moment, right? The A is acknowledge or authenticity. So acknowledge is like, what am I feeling right now? What's my experience? I'm feeling anxious, or I'm feeling hopeless, or I'm feeling stressed, or I have a flurry of thoughts, right? It's just acknowledging without judgment, right? Acknowledging what my present moment experience is. And then the P is proceed. What do I want to do? How do I want to show up in this moment? Do I want to be a victim to my thoughts of anxiety or to the physical correlates of stress? The P is something we can't tell you what to do, right? Even when I'm a therapist, or excuse me, even when I'm in my therapy sessions, I don't tell my clients what to do. What I do is help them become present and train themselves so that they can ask themselves that question, because there's so many different things you can do when you're feeling anxious or depressed or stressed, right? But ultimately, like I said, we're capacity builders. We help you learn to answer these questions on your own. But when you do this, when you practice tap in the moment, it's like any other skill. You can start to get good at it. You can start to bring yourself in the moment so that you can start to ask those questions. For example, how do I want to show up right now? How do I want to respond to this anxiety or this situation right now? And then wait and see that insight come up so that you can experience yourself potentially doing something different, right? One thing I like to tell clients is, if you just remember this acronym, literally, if you just write this down right now, take a breath, acknowledge, proceed. If you look at this every day and remind yourself what this stands for, you'll be a little bit more, you'll have a little bit more of a chance to actually utilize it when you need it. Because it's not that hard to talk about it right now. It's a lot harder to actually use it when you need it, when the stress is high, when the depression, when the anxiety is high. That's the hardest part, is the behavioral change of getting these to become habits, which we're going to talk about how to do that in a moment, right? So if you do that every day, you'll be much more likely to use it. If you want to take it one step further, visualize yourself practicing tap. So visualize yourself going through an anxious experience or something like that. On a scale of 1 to 10, pick something that's like a 5, like not something that's overwhelmingly anxious, right? Pick something that you can still be present to, so like a 5 or less. And visualize yourself going through tap. That will help you even train your mind a little bit better to award you the ability to use it when you need it. And the best thing you can do, the absolute best thing you can do, is actually will yourself to use it when you're anxious or when you're depressed or when you're stressed or whatever it is, in real time, in real life. It's the hardest thing to do, but when you do it once, you can actually gain momentum with it. I use tap all the time. I use tap with my clients when I'm getting overwhelmed. I use tap with my wife, with my kids, with my business partner, and all the time when I need to check in with myself. And sometimes it's not always a negative thing, right? It's not always because I'm frustrated. Sometimes it's because I'm feeling really positive as well, or feeling joy or something like that. And I want to experience that more fully. Tap can do that as well. So I wanted to just offer this as a technique because I found it very, very helpful with the clients I work with. Very, very helpful for myself as well. And it's very simple. It's not something you need to kind of put on a whole ordeal. Sometimes when we do meditation, it can feel like, oh, I gotta go do this thing now. It's another, and it's a another chore, and that's a barrier, something that gets in the way. Um, but tap is something you can do just in about 5 or 10 seconds, right? So I wanted to leave you with that. We don't have time for our body scan meditation, but I do promise that we can do kind of a part two of this webinar in the future, and we can go over some other techniques. What I want to finish talking about for about 5 minutes here is how do we incorporate some of these practices into our minds? Or excuse me, into our lives. We've talked about what mindfulness is. We've talked about two different ways to utilize and experience and practice mindfulness. But sometimes this is what I hear from a lot of people. I'm too busy for mindfulness. I got all this stuff going on. I'm too anxious or depressed or stressed, or I can't get the strategies to stick. So I just want to go over 5 very brief tips that can potentially be helpful to help get some these mindfulness strategies to stick. This is almost as important as the technique itself. It's actually utilizing it. It's actually practicing it consistently. If you can practice it consistently, you'll actually bear the fruit and experience non-judgment, experience the meditative and the mindful mind, and that will help you start to take control over your life in many ways, or the people that you're working with. So I'm going to go over these very brief because they're just quick tips, but they can be very, very powerful. Tip number one, write down your goal. So let's say you want to start practicing mindful breathing and you want to do it 3 days a week. Literally write it down, put it in your schedule. It's good to actually write it by hand too. That encodes it into the brain a little bit more. It will help you remember it more. The key, obviously, to putting it into your schedule and making it stick is first remembering to do it. And of course, now we have a lot of tech that can help with that too. You can put it in your phone calendar or something like that, right? A lot of research has shown that if you write down your goals, you're more likely to practice them daily and achieve the outcome that you want. Number two, start with the 2 minute rule. This comes from a great book called Atomic Habits by an author named James Clear. What's the 2 minute rule? Like we were talking about before, if you want to develop a mindful breathing practice, for example, because again, one thing you'll hear from me as a therapist or Servi or Miko or anybody that works at Family Spring, really any meditation teacher will say, if you want to bear the fruits of it, if you want to experience the outcome you're looking for, you have to practice. It's just like anything else, right? But if you start with 30 minutes, that could feel super overwhelming. If you say, I'm going to meditate for 30 minutes, every day of the week, that could be overwhelming. If you're not there yet, that's okay. Start with something that you can do in 2 minutes, just 2 minutes of practice. After a while, that will feel very normal. It'll feel very doable, and then you can add time onto it. Next is habit stacking. This essentially means pairing your 2 minute practice with something you already do that's easy, that's habitual, that will help you start to integrate it into your life. So, for example, I had a client once who was struggling very hard to develop a mindfulness meditation practice. That's what he wanted to do. This was during the pandemic too. He was working from home. He was really stressed out. He was an engineer, and he said to me, I asked him, what do you do throughout the day? And he said, well, in the middle of the day, I always take a walk to the park. And I say, great. If you always take a walk to the park around noon every day, when you get to the park and you sit on your bench, because he told me he goes to the park, he sits on the bench for a couple of minutes, and then he comes back home and gets back to work. When you go to the park and you sit on the bench, that's where I want you to practice that 2 minutes of mindfulness. So the habit that he already has, that's very easy for him to do, is walking to the park every day. The one that he's pairing with it, that he's stacking with it, is the 2 minutes of mindfulness. Fourth, this is a very powerful one. Surround yourself with people where what you want to do is the norm. If you want to learn meditation, join meditation communities. If you want to become a cycler, join a cycling club, right? When other people are doing it and it's normal, it's like, yeah, this is just something we do. It's going to be so much easier for you to engage with it. And then finally, I told you this was brief, right? Finally, if you've tried these four things and you're struggling and anxiety or depression or stress is getting in the way of your life, of professional stuff, of job, of work, of school, of relationships, that's when it may be important to seek professional help. Because if it's getting in the way, now it's time to really invest in yourself and have that trained accountability partner who has the expertise to be able to help you. So like I said, this is very brief, but this is very important. These are things that I do to develop habits. This is what me and all the clinicians here at Family Spring do to help people integrate different types of habits into their lives and take negative habits out of their lives so that they can start to, for example, practice mindfulness consistently, see some of the benefits of it, and build off of that momentum. All kind of, under the auspice of we're helping them take back control of their lives, learn to regulate and manage themselves, and stay on that path towards true healing and growth. That's really what we're about. So, folks, this is what we did. We talked briefly about a self-care framework. We were able to do the mindful breathing meditation. We practiced TAP, the take a breath, acknowledge and proceed, which is informal mindfulness. And very briefly, I know it was very fast, we talked about 5 brief tips to making self-care stick. So let me just see real quick if there's anything in the Q&A. We didn't get any actual questions in the Q&A. So if you have a question, you can go ahead and drop that in real quick while I take a swig of water. We probably only have time for 1 or 2 before we wrap up, because I want to get folks out of here on time. And one of the questions that comes up all the time, this is very general, one of the questions that comes up all the time is essentially, how can I develop a mindfulness practice that will really help? How can I do that? Again, I know I just said this, but I'm going to say it one more time. It's if you haven't if you have tried all of those things, it may be, and none of those have worked, and it's been difficult for you to gain some traction, it may be time to seek professional help. We do have a question that came through real quick, so let me get to this before we move on. What is the term you used when the mind wanders? It started with a D. I don't remember what the term is. Let me think. It started with a D. I can't think of that. I'm gonna have to go back. I apologize. I'm gonna have to go back and think about what the and I'll go check the what's it called? The recording. Another good question that's coming in. Do you recommend mindfulness 2, 3, or more times a day? Is it helpful? Okay, great question. I just got it. I'm sorry. I'm going to come back to that. The D, disidentify, was the D, I think, when the mind wanders. Okay, back to this question. Do you recommend mindfulness 2, 3, or more times a day? Is it helpful? That's a great question. If you're just starting out, do whatever you can do to actually do it, right? Like, you don't want to overwhelm yourself. This kind of goes into the 2-minute rule a little bit. You don't want to overwhelm yourself. Now, if you have some traction and you're like, I want to integrate this into my life, doing 10 or 15 minutes twice a day, maybe once in the morning, once in the evening, that can be very beneficial. I have had many different experiences where I've had different practices, right? I've meditated for an hour a day for years. I've meditated for 20 minutes a day, twice a day. I've done informal mindfulness. I've done a lot of different things, right? A good starting point, and this is for folks who have traction, who you committed to the practice, you're kind of past the 2-minute rule, and you want a little bit more. 15 or 20 minutes a day, twice a day, do that for a couple of months. You will most likely see a strong benefit, maybe even before then, but that's what the research shows. You do it for a couple of months, 15, 20 minutes a day, twice a day, once sometime closer to the morning, once sometime closer to the evening, you're going to see a lot of really good benefits. So this is great, folks. Let me just go. I want to respect everyone's time. I will download the Q&A and I will send, if there's anything else there, I will send it out in the email as well. I want to just make a quick note. If for those of you who are looking for potentially professional support, this is what we do at Family Spring. We are most known for helping children, adolescents, and young adults. Like I said, I work with a lot of incarcerated youth, substance abusing youth, so on and so forth. But our clinicians actually work with everybody. We work with young professionals, middle-aged adults, people struggling with anxiety, depression, all of that. And I just want to say, if anything in this webinar resonated with you and you're at the part where you need professional help, and you live in California, we can only serve people in California at this point, but because of telehealth, because of the online world, we can serve anyone in California. I highly, highly recommend getting on our colleague Surbi Mehta's calendar. She's a LMFT. She was going to be doing the webinar last week. She will be doing it at the end of July. She is awesome. She does a lot with mindfulness, a lot with yoga. So if you're interested in that, I would say go ahead and fill out one of our inquiries at the link that you're seeing on your screen right now. I'm just going to drop that link in the chat real quick before we go. Here it is coming in now. There it is. So if you or anyone you know is really in need of that professional support, she has just a few slots left. She's almost full, but she's like I said, she's a rock star. She's awesome. Go ahead and check it out. Fill out the inquiry. Either myself or our clinical director will call you back within 24 hours or so and get you all situated with her. We have limited space as well, but we just, she has more slots. So I just wanted to put that out there for anybody who is interested. That's about it, folks. I'm going to unshare my screen. I'm going to say thank you so much for being here. This was great. It's very easy for me to do this work. I love doing these presentations. The only thing I wish is that we were in person so I could connect with you all in the same space, but this is how it is right now. Don't be a stranger. We will be doing webinars like this probably monthly for a while, at least throughout the summer. Like I said, next webinar will be July 27th. That's a Tuesday. Around the same time, that's when Surbi will be doing the rescheduled webinar on how to use yoga techniques for depression and anxiety, especially if any of you are interested in potentially engaging our services. If you live in California, you're kind of on the fence and you're like, maybe I'm interested in working with Surbi or anybody else, definitely come to that webinar. But go ahead and fill out that link, or go to that link and fill out an inquiry if that's something you're interested in. And if you know anybody, we would be happy to help them as well. I can't wait for the next one, folks. Thank you so much. We'll probably be sending the recording out probably before the end of the day. We're on West Coast California time here. So I'd say, by 5 or something like that. At the very latest, it would come out tomorrow. But I just need to upload it on the YouTube and get it on our channel, and then I will send that email out. So thank you all, folks. I hope you have a wonderful day or wonderful evening, and we will see you at the next one. All right, y'all. Have a good one. Bye.